Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host, Diane. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane. Is there a fine line? Is there a fine line to being heroic and unscrupulous? Is there a fine line to being famous and infamous? Oftentimes people have different personalities, different opinions on other people's actions and inactions. On the program today, we're going to talk about heroes of New Mexico from the eyes of my author and guest, John de Aragon. So, in your opinion, are these folks heroes or not heroes? Are they famous or infamous? So we're going to talk to John about the books that he's written, the characters he's talking about, and some heroic efforts of our past. So please stay with us as we talk to John de Aragon about heroes in New Mexico. We'll be back right after this.
Hey America, now there's a place where we can join our voice, Real America's Voice. Real America's Voice is coming to a town near you with a grassroots approach, bringing the real voice of America together. Real America's Voice is growing our family of networks across the country, and soon you could be part of that change. Download the Real America's Voice app and join other Americans just like you across the country, coming together for real.
Time to think about heroes. Who's a hero to you? Who's been a hero in your life? And who would you like to become? What kind of hero would you like to become? On my show today, we're going to talk to John de Aragon, a famous author here in New Mexico, one of our favorite guests because he talks about the history and all his research in New Mexico. And specifically, he wants to talk about heroes. What about Padre Martinez and Bishop Lamy? Which one's the hero? Which one's the unscrupulous character? Well, we're going to hear from John, his opinion, because it's different from other people's opinions. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. And thank you, John, for wanting to talk about heroes in New Mexico. It's time to think about heroes. And we're going to go back and talk about Padre Martinez, but Bishop Lamy. But let's talk more our present day heroes. The past century, I think that seems current, the past century. Who are some of the more famous heroes in your mind and people that you've written about and researched?
Well, you know, right after I graduated from high school, I became a member of the Alianza Federal de Mercedes. It was the Alliance for Land Grants in New Mexico with Reyes Lopez Tijerina. And you know, we hear a great deal about Dr. Martin Luther King, of course. It was a tremendous hero in American history. Another tremendous hero in American history is Cesar Chavez from California. They were fighting for people's rights and social justice and civil rights. And that's exactly what Reyes Tijerina did here in New Mexico. He isn't as well known. He has been written about, and there have been motion pictures that have been produced about his life and career. But the everyday person doesn't know about his involvement in what he did. And
Fighting for land grant rights in northern New Mexico.
Native American land rights also. So, like I said, civil rights and social justice was his theme.
Have you written about him?
And I'm working on a new book on him, and entirely on him. And
tell us a real short version.
Reyes Lopez Tijerina was a minister of a church in Texas. And he had grown up as involved in sharecropping, you know, as picking cotton. Actually, his father and mother were picking cotton in Texas, so that was their livelihood. And then traveling with farm workers from one place to another, depending on what they were going to be picking at the time.
So what happened here in New Mexico?
So he eventually wound up moving to Santa Fe, and then he liked New Mexico. So the rest of his life he was spent here in New Mexico. And I called it the social justice triad of Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez, and Reyes Lopez Tijerina, because Tijerina was involved in the Poor People's March in Washington, D.C., and very actively involved throughout the Southwest, fighting for the loss of lands in those areas after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, and one because a lot of people lost their farms and ranches. They were taken over by the federal government to produce the forest, national forests. And that's what happened to the Native Americans also. So a lot of the land that was supposed to be guaranteed, that would be
because the land grant, it should be
in
guaranteed.
perpetuity. Yes, that would be held in perpetuity.
What happened at the courthouse?
The raid at Tierra Maria. It's
Raid at Tierra Maria.
Yeah, it was main national news, of course, international news. And the thing is that what actually happened is that they were going to have a gathering there, and they talk about land grant issues, but then I believe it was one of the mayors prohibited the gathering, and then it was supported by the state, the lieutenant governor, especially because the governor David Cargo was out of state at the time. So the lieutenant governor took over, and so they were going to gather anyway because they felt it was a people's right, and that several hundred people are going to gather over there and listen to to Reyes Lopez Tijerina as the civil rights leader in New Mexico to do a speech and talk
then
about
what
the
happened?
issues. So anyway, it got out of control because one thing led to another. And the lieutenant governor called the Army National Guard to go in there with tanks, and I was in the military at the time. I was a member of the New Mexico National Guard, and I was a member of the Alianza, but I was also a member of the New Mexico National Guard, and we were put on standby, so in case they needed the jets from Kirtland Air Force Base to bomb the area. So, so that's why it made the international news, because they said they started calling it an uprising of the people, Hispanic people in New Mexico, and that they were trying to take over the government in New Mexico, which was entirely untrue. But like I said, rumors spread, and it kept on spreading. Anyway, Reyes Lopez Tijerina wasn't involved with anything. There was a large manhunt trying to track him down. Before he even went over there, they were looking for him and wanted to arrest him. So anyway, the story, the long story short was that he was exonerated of all charges, but then eventually he wound up serving time in penitentiary, and for the involvement in a national forest that he really actually didn't have anything to do with. But then
so you're writing all about this.
Yes.
And you consider him a hero.
And of course, he was a hero of the people, because he was for the poor, the defenseless, and the downtrodden.
And you're writing about him.
Yes.
What other?
And Padre Martinez, of course, was the same way. And I wrote my book, Padre Martinez and Bishop Lamy. I started doing the research as a university student, and
this is about
the famous priest,
Bishop Lamy.
The
death comes for the Archbishop from Willa.
Well, Catherine, I had to read that as in our English class at the university. We had to read "Death Comes for the Archbishop." That was required reading.
But there's a fine line between who is the hero.
Bishop Lamy was a hero in her book, but it was a fictional book, historical fiction. But people that read it took it as historical fact, because you asked, was the Dixon writer, of course.
I guess I thought it was.
It's a classic. It's a national classic, and it's been since 1928. It's been reprinted every single year. It's always been a bestseller.
But what's your opinion? So this is Death Comes to the Archbishop is a fiction.
Yes.
But you did research.
And
what did your research
find? And the research, the truth is that Archbishop Lamy was not a hero, like she paints it up in her book. And Padre Martinez was not the villain that she painted up in, because she played two ends against each other. This is the hero, Bishop Lamy, and his sidekick, the one that's the Vicar General, Macabov. And Padre Martinez and those that followed him were the villains in her book.
What did you find?
So, Padre Martinez was actually the folk, because he was regarded as a folk hero among the people in Mexico. including the Native Americans, thought of him as a great hero in the history. And so the fact was that Bishop Lamy was the villain, and especially his Vicar General.
Well, what did you call them?
Vicar General, because he was second.
No, right, but what did you call them?
They were the villains, yeah, pretty much, because one of the first things that Bishop Lamy did when he came in, and I'll tell you also that.
Wait, tell me what happened when he came in.
Well, for one thing, he didn't know how to speak Spanish, and he had been assigned to an area when he was French, so he wound up learning English, but he spoke broken English. And then he wound up being, through the years, he wound up being adept in English. But he was, when he was young, when he became a young priest, after he came from France to the United States, he was assigned to an area where it was a German community as a parish priest. And he didn't know German. So you can imagine what was going on.
What made him, well, we're supposed to be talking about heroes,
but anyway, he came to New Mexico.
Why is a villain in your opinion,
he wanted to replace the colonial architecture that was here from the 1700s at the churches with more French style.
But that's what our Cathedral Basilica de Santa Fe is.
Yeah, so anyway, he was what they regard as a Francophile because that was his culture. Coming from France, he wanted French-style churches in New Mexico. So the first thing he did after he was assigned as a bishop, and even that was contested. So if he actually was assigned.
Okay, but
he wound up tearing down the original church that was built in the 1700s. There was a massive, beautiful Spanish colonial church that was built around 1750, and he had them tear that down to build his cathedral. And to build his cathedral, he started tithing the poor. So they had to pay for a baptism, they had to pay for a confirmation, they had to pay for a wedding, and a certain amount. And he wanted to collect all those funds so he could build his cathedral. And that's a beautiful cathedral. I mean, you can't take that away from him. That's one of the icons of Santa Fe today. And
you have it on your cover.
Yes.
So, but your opinion with the tithing and tearing down the Spanish colonial, he's a villain.
He's a villain, yes.
But here's the...
Because he did not regard the local people at all. Well, he couldn't speak Spanish, so he had interpreters, and a lot of times they misinterpreted what the people were actually saying. So, that's what happens when
you found this research. Did other people find this in their research, Ray John?
Now, today, yes. Because after my book appeared, it was very controversial, of course. And controversy sells, so it became a bestseller. And it's been reprinted several times. And in fact, I was called to do a show in New York City because they were interested in the subject, and all because of Willow Cather's book.
And that you kind of disputed.
So it was covered in all the newspapers, and it got front page coverage in the newspapers because of Padre Martinez and the controversy with, because what wound up happening is that Padre Martinez was excommunicated ipso facto by the bishop because he wouldn't follow what he was doing. He was still not charging people for and not sending the amount of money that other priests were supposed to, that the priests were supposed to send in from the collection of tithes.
So he was excommunicated.
So eventually he was excommunicated because he stood up to the bishop, which you cannot do.
And that's why you regard him, your research regards...
Well, the people regarded him as a folk hero. Even my mother introduced me to him when I was a little boy. She said Padre Martinez was a hero of New Mexico. And the reason she talked about him is because she came, like I mentioned, she was from Penasco Blanco, a little Spanish colonial village. It was near Mora, New Mexico. And Mora is quite a number of miles away from Taos, New Mexico, where Padre Martinez was the parish priest at the Our Lady of Guadalupe Church there. But his ministry had him ride on horseback to different areas during that period in the 1840s and 1850s and 1860s. and give and minister to the people in those little tiny villages. So he traveled on horseback for miles and miles to go minister to the people. So that's why he was regarded as a folk hero there in those communities, because they actually got to meet him, and he spoke about the rights of the people. He was one of the first ones that was a proponent of civil rights.
In New Mexico here?
In New Mexico.
Is this the same?
Yes, there was somebody, one of his contemporaries, Pedro Sanchez, wrote a book that was published in Santa Fe in 1903 in Spanish, and then I translated it into English. And the state historian, Dr. Byron Jenkins, wrote a little foreword for this book.
This is Recollections of the Life
of the Priest,
Don Antonio Jose Martinez.
Yes.
By Pedro Sanchez, Memorias sobre la vida de, okay. So actually this author, Pedro Sanchez, wrote
regarded him as a
regarded
hero,
him as like your mother did, like your mother and the people did as a hero. Okay. So thank you. This is about heroes. Who else would you like to speak about as a hero?
One that's not really, that should have gotten the Congressional Medal of Honor, posthumously, of course, because Lieutenant Colonel Manuel Antonio Chavez, there was Dr. Mark Simmons from Santa Fe wrote a book about him called El Leoncito, because they called him the Little Lion, and because he was highly regarded as in the military. He was served in the military back during before the Civil War period as a Spanish soldier, and then after the Civil War period, he became an American officer. And so the Confederates were under President Jefferson Davis and the Confederate Congress wanted to take over the Southwest, which is still part of the United States, for obvious reasons, because of there had been found gold in these areas, and anyway, they invaded New Mexico. The Confederates invaded New Mexico.
Who did?
The Confederates, and the Confederate Army, the Confederate forces, and they took over Santa Fe. And then there was Fort Union by Las Vegas. That was a military fort that was vulnerable, so their intention was to take over Fort Union also. And there were what they call the park speakers, that were volunteers from Colorado that wanted to join in. And the reason that was happening, that they needed volunteers, is because most of the military that was assigned to New Mexico territory wound up leaving New Mexico, and some joined the Confederacy and some joined the Union Army.
So what happened with the lieutenant colonel?
So there were the New Mexico Volunteers, and the University of New Mexico Press put out a beautiful publication that covers who was involved, and who the officers and who the regular soldiers were, and the names and their units, and it's a very large volume.
So what did the lieutenant?
But anyway, there were 12,000 New Mexico volunteers that were serving New Mexico to protect the area, and to defeat the Confederates. But then they paid for their own forces. I mean, they had their own horses, they had their own armament, they had their own food supplies, because the United States government couldn't provide anything at that time.
So how was he a hero? Because we're going to talk about other heroes as well.
The Confederates marched, and pretty much the Fort Union soldiers and other military moved over into Apache Canyon, and the Battle of Glorieta was fought. The famous battle, they call it one of the most famous battles in the Civil War history. But the Union soldiers were being slaughtered. Even the pike speakers, because they didn't know the terrain, they didn't know how to, they were very vulnerable there at that place, and so the Confederates moving from Santa Fe north were able to set up their cannon, and they had already prepared themselves, so they were the Union soldiers were being defeated, and the governor Connolly, the governor at the time, didn't know what to do, so. It was an easy march to Fort Union, and then to Colorado, to the Colorado gold fields. Then from there, they're going to go to California and take over California. And that was going to help the Confederacy
All that gold, yeah.
to take over and defeat the Union.
So what happened?
So anyway, the governor didn't know what to do. And Lieutenant Colonel one of Antonio Chavez had a mounted soldiers, about 200, that were under his command. And he told him, our cause is lost, we're being defeated, can you help us? So he set out from wherever he was at the time with 200 soldiers, and they rode as hard as they could up to the battle scene. And then he studied the situation, and then he had everybody get ropes, and they used ropes to climb up to the cliffs, up the sides of the cliffs to the top of the mountain, and they went, and then they lowered the ropes on the other side of the cliffs. And when he saw that the Confederates had all their supplies, their food supplies, and cannon and gunpowder and all that, and so then they lowered themselves. He and his force lowered themselves, and they blew up everything. It destroyed everything because they only had a few guards. They were so sure of themselves that they only had a few guards protecting all the supplies. And so then he wound up. The Confederates wound up being defeated, and they left New Mexico.
Wow! What book is that written in?
None. Well, one of mine. Yeah, Hunters of the Fe.
What is it?
Hunters of the Fe. I wrote the whole story in there because I did a lot of research.
That's a lot of research. You also like Senator Dennis Chavez.
Senator Dennis Chavez. Well, going back
and
to...
only we have a few minutes left, so just give me the real quick
U.S.
recap.
Senator Dennis Chavez was in the 1930s, very popular senator, second to pretty much to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II. He was one of his advisors, and he had a very high position coming from New Mexico, and extremely well-known, popular. You know, he won several terms. He died in office. He was for civil rights, one of the first proponents of civil rights that's very little known about. So
and you've written about him in which book?
Actually, there's a statue in his honor in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. And so he was memorialized by the United States Congress, and I wrote about him in New Mexico Stolen Lands, and I included a photograph of his.
New Mexico Stolen Lands.
Yes.
You also believe and write about Thibaut Chavez.
Yes, Thibaut Chavez was
just the highlights.
Served as lieutenant governor, and then he was an herbologist. He wrote about the remedies, and he actually had an herb garden, and so he very highly regarded because he also wrote about New Mexico, and he wanted to preserve the history. So he wrote a book on Belen, New Mexico. El Rio Bajo is the title of the book, and I was one of the books that I got. And I wound up meeting him and talking to him, and he impressed me so much, you know, and he was one of my supporters. And Dr. Sabino Ulibarri from Tierra Maria.
Sabina Ulibarri.
Yes, he was. The interesting thing about Dr. Sabino Ulibarri is that he wrote numerous books in Spanish. And he was popular in Latin America. And as a university student, I heard his name because I was majoring in Spanish and bilingual education. So I heard his name, and then I wound up reading some of his books, and I wound up meeting him. And so he was a professor at the University of New Mexico, the department for set of the Modern Foreign Languages department. And then he was appointed to the Spanish Royal Academy by the King of Spain to serve on the academy. So,
and you believe he's a hero?
Yes, of course, he's a hero. Because authors are heroes too. You know, like Pablo Picasso is a hero in the arts. You know, in Spain is
and Rodolfo Anaya.
And Rodolfo Anaya, of course, wrote Bless Me Ultima, that was a national bestseller, and he's recognized. And he came from the area where I'm from Las Vegas, New Mexico, and he was from next door, Santa Rosa, and pretty much with a similar background as I did, as I had, and became a very popular writer and wrote numerous books. Fabiola Cabeza de Vaca was from my area over there by Las Vegas, and she lived in the 1930s, and she wrote for the Santa Fe New Mexican, and she wound up writing a very famous book or popular book called "We Fed Them Cactus," and I was required reading when I was at the university, and that was a bestseller. So I figured that that people should know about them and what they did, and they serve as role models for our kids, our students in school. And those role models, students need role models. They need somebody to help them build up their self-esteem, and by promoting this heritage, and that's why they have the Hispanic Heritage Month, to honor those that came before, or even on the present day. And in the present day, we've got, of course, celebrities that are involved in, whether in the music industry or the arts and sports, especially in sports. Yeah.
Too much in sports. But so current generations and future will consider Ray John de Aragon a hero of New Mexico.
Yeah.
You have delved in, you have researched a lot of historical items, events, and people to find the truth. And Ray John, it's not an easy thing to do.
No, it isn't. And then the thing is that as a university student, and having my required reading, and there was a lot of myths that were perpetuated that were totally untrue or fiction that people wound up believing in because it was kept on being reprinted in history books. And then I thought to myself, well, there has got to be more to this story. And so I wound up writing about those traditions of culture and heritage, and especially the history.
To set the story right,
yes.
Between that fine line of famous and infamous.
Yes.
Ray John de Aragon, thank you so much for being part of this program. And we thank the TV station, too, to bring you this opportunity to meet people like Ray John de Aragon, a hero of New Mexico.
Thank you.
Appreciate that so much. Thanks for all you've done for our generation and future generations to tell the story as he sees it, as his research shows, setting the story straight. Ray John de Aragon. Thank you for watching this program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Make it a great week with your family. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
The New Mexico Modern Child Support Family Program works to benefit both parents for the purpose of improving children's lives. It provides the basics of child support, but goes further by helping parents step up to find better job opportunities that get them back on track to paying their monthly child support obligation. Find out how the Child Support Step Up program can help your modern family. Contact New Mexico Child Support today to learn more.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.